This altar wasn't about love. It was about endings.
The pregnancy test landed in the trash with a soft thud. Graham Elkin stared at it through the bathroom doorway, watching his wife Maris smooth her dental scrubs over her flat stomach. 3 months. She'd said 3 months. He'd had a vasectomy 2 years ago. "Graham, you okay in there?" Maris called from the bedroom. "Fine," he said, flushing the toilet for effect. The porcelain handle felt cold under his palm. Everything felt cold now. Outside, Vermont's summer air hung thick over the lake. Their daughter Dahlia's laughter echoed from the dock where she sat with Jonas, her fiancé, 21 years old and planning a wedding in 2 weeks. Graham had paid for the venue, the flowers, the dress. He'd written the check yesterday. Now he wondered if he'd been paying for something else entirely. "Dad," Dahlia waved from the water. "Come see the sunset." Graham walked to the cabin's deck, his work boots heavy on the wooden planks. HVAC repair had calloused his hands, taught him patience. Systems broke down slowly, then all at once. You had to watch for the signs. Jonas stood behind Dahlia, his hands on her shoulders. Medical school dropout, now studying to be a paramedic. Handsome in a way that made older women look twice. Graham had noticed Maris looking. "Beautiful night," Jonas said as Graham approached. "Thanks again for letting me tag along on the family vacation." "Family," Graham repeated. The word tasted different now. Maris emerged from the cabin wearing a sundress Graham didn't recognize. Yellow with small flowers. When had she bought it? She'd been spending more lately. New clothes, salon visits, yoga classes that ran late into the evening. "The baby's going to love it here," she said, settling into the chair beside him. All this fresh air. Graham nodded. The vasectomy scar itched under his swim trunks. "When's your next doctor's appointment?" he asked. "Thursday. Dr. Williams wants to do another ultrasound." Maris smiled, but her eyes shifted to Jonas. "Just for a second. Want to come with me?" "I'll be working." "Of course you will." Dahlia turned in her chair. "Mom, are you sure you're okay with me getting married so soon? I mean, with the baby coming." "Honey, life doesn't wait for perfect timing," Maris said. "Your father and I learned that the hard way." Graham remembered their wedding. Maris had been 26, working at the dental office where she still worked now. He'd been 31, recently divorced, trying to build something stable for Dahlia. Maris had seemed safe then, reliable. She'd made him feel like he could trust again. "I'm going to grab a beer," he said, standing. Inside the cabin, he opened the refrigerator and stared at the bottles. Corona with lime. Jonas's favorite. Graham had noticed that too. He'd been noticing a lot of things lately. The laptop bag sat on the kitchen counter. Jonas's MacBook, plugged into the wall beside Graham's Wi-Fi extender. The sink light blinked green. Graham had set up the network himself. His tools folder automatically backed up any connected devices, a security feature he'd installed after his divorce, when his ex-wife had tried to hide assets on shared computers. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't look. The laptop opened to a desktop photo of Dahlia and Jonas at some restaurant. She was laughing, her engagement ring catching the light. Graham clicked on the network folder. The photos loaded one by one. Maris, topless in what looked like their master bedroom. Jonas, shirtless, in their master bedroom. The timestamp showed last Tuesday. Graham had been installing air conditioning units at the high school. He scrolled down. More photos, a video file. His hands shook as he clicked play. "Are you sure Graham won't be back?" Jonas's voice, breathy with excitement. "He's working late. He always works late." Maris's voice, huskier than Graham had heard it in years. "Besides, this is our last chance before the wedding. I still can't believe Dahlia doesn't suspect anything. She's too young to understand how these things work, how marriages really work." Graham closed the laptop. The sound of laughter drifted in from the deck. His daughter's laughter, bright and trusting. In 2 weeks, she would marry the man who was sleeping with her stepmother, the man who might be the father of the baby his wife claimed was his. The beer bottle slipped from his hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. Amber liquid spread across the linoleum, mixing with the broken glass. "Graham?" Maris called. "Everything okay?" "Just dropped something," he said, sweeping up the pieces with his bare hands. A shard cut his palm, and red drops splashed into the glass. "I'll clean it up." "You're hurt," Dahlia said, appearing in the doorway. "Dad, you're shaking." Graham looked at his daughter's face, so young and concerned. In the yellow light of the kitchen, she looked just like her mother, his first wife, the one who died in a car accident when Dahlia was 3, the one who'd never lied to him, never betrayed him, never made him question everything he thought he knew about love. "I'm fine," he said. "Just tired." "Why don't you sit down? I'll finish cleaning up." Graham watched his daughter kneel on the kitchen floor, carefully picking up the glass. She was going to be a mother soon. The thought made his chest tight. She deserved better than this. Better than Jonas. Better than the family that was about to explode around her. But maybe she already knew. Maybe she was already part of it. "Dahlia," he said quietly, "when did you first know you loved Jonas?" She looked up from the floor, surprised by the question. "I don't know, it just happened. Why? And when did you first bring him around Maris?" "Dad, what's wrong? You're scaring me." "Nothing's wrong. I'm just trying to understand the timeline." "The timeline of what?" Graham stared at his daughter, searching her face for signs of deception. But all he saw was confusion and worry. She didn't know. She had no idea that her fiancé was sleeping with her stepmother, that the baby Maris carried might be his grandchild and his stepchild at the same time. "Never mind," he said. "I think I need some air." Outside, Jonas and Maris sat close together on the dock, their voices low. They separated when they saw him coming, but not quickly enough. Graham had spent 15 years reading people's tells, watching for the signs that systems were failing. These two were a system on the verge of complete breakdown. "You okay, Mr. Elkin?" Jonas asked. "Dahlia said you cut yourself." "I'm fine." Graham sat in the chair across from them, studying Jonas's face. The boy looked nervous, shifting in his seat. "Tell me about your paramedic training. You enjoying it?" "It's challenging, but rewarding, you know. Helping people in crisis. Must be expensive." "It is, but I'm managing." Jonas glanced at Maris. "I've had some help." "What kind of help?" "Graham," Maris interrupted. "Why the third degree?" "Just curious about my future son-in-law's finances, making sure he can take care of Dahlia." "He doesn't need to prove anything to you," Maris said, her voice sharp. Graham looked at his wife. In the fading light, she looked younger than her 39 years. The pregnancy glow, maybe. Or maybe it was something else. Something that had nothing to do with the baby she claimed was his. "I'm going to call it a night," he said, standing. "Long day tomorrow." "We're all going into town for breakfast," Dahlia said, rejoining the group. "That little diner with the blueberry pancakes. You love that place." "I might skip it. Need to check on some work stuff." "Dad, you're on vacation. Some things can't wait." In the cabin, Graham pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Lester Brome, private investigator. They'd worked together during his divorce when his ex-wife had tried to hide money in offshore accounts. Lester was expensive but thorough. He'd found everything. Graham hesitated, his thumb hovering over the call button. Once he made this call, there would be no going back. Once he opened this door, everything would change. The sound of laughter drifted through the window. Maris and Jonas still on the dock, still sitting too close. He made the call. "Lester, it's Graham Elkin. I need your help again." "Graham, been a while. What's the situation?" "I need you to look into my wife and my daughter's fiancé. I think they're having an affair." "Crap. How long you been suspicious?" "About 3 hours." "That recent, huh? What triggered it?" Graham told him about the photos, the overheard conversation, the pregnancy that didn't add up. Lester listened without interrupting, asking only the relevant questions. When Graham finished, there was silence on the other end. "Graham, you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know." "I already know. I just need proof." "Proof for what? Divorce?" Graham looked out the window at his daughter, who was now showing Jonas something on her phone. They looked so happy together, so innocent. In 2 weeks, they would stand at an altar and promise to love each other forever. The same promise Graham had made to Maris 6 years ago. "I'm not sure yet," he said. "Just get me the proof." The next morning, Graham woke to the sound of Maris vomiting in the bathroom. Morning sickness, she'd explained. Part of the pregnancy experience. He lay in bed listening to her retch, thinking about the timing. 3 months pregnant, she'd said. That would put conception sometime in March. In March, Graham had been in Albany for a week, training on new HVAC systems. He'd called home every night, and Maris had always been there to answer. But that didn't mean anything. People could lie about where they were, what they were doing, who they were with. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother, Velma. "Can't wait to see everyone this weekend. So excited about the wedding and the baby." His mother was driving up from Connecticut for the wedding. She'd been thrilled when Dahlia announced her engagement. Even more thrilled when Maris announced her pregnancy. A new grandchild and a new grandson-in-law, all in the same month. Graham hadn't had the heart to tell her about his suspicions. "Looking forward to it," he texted back. Maris emerged from the bathroom, pale but dressed. Morning sickness is supposed to get better after the first trimester, but mine seems to be getting worse. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "I have an appointment when we get back. Dr. Williams wants to run some tests." Graham nodded. Dr. Williams had been Maris's gynecologist for years. He'd delivered Dahlia when she was born, back when Graham's first wife was still alive. If anyone would know the truth about Maris's pregnancy, it would be him. "I think I'll come with you to that appointment," Graham said. Maris looked surprised. "Really? You never come to my doctor appointments." "This is different. This is our baby." Something flickered across Maris's face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. She turned away, pretending to look for something in her purse. "That would be nice," she said, but her voice sounded forced. Downstairs, Dahlia was making coffee. Jonas sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his laptop, the same laptop that had revealed everything. "Morning, Mr. Elkin," Jonas said without looking up. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," Graham said, pouring himself coffee. "What are you working on?" "Just some practice exams, paramedic certification stuff." Graham moved behind Jonas's chair, ostensibly to get cream from the refrigerator. On the laptop screen, he could see Jonas's email inbox. Several messages from M. Elkin with subject lines like "Can't wait to see you" and "Thinking of you." "Looks challenging," Graham said. Jonas minimized the email window quickly. "It is, but I'm determined to pass." "Good for you. It's important to finish what you start." At breakfast, the four of them sat in a booth at the local diner. Dahlia chattered about wedding plans while Maris picked at her blueberry pancakes. Jonas contributed to the conversation but kept glancing at his phone. Every few minutes, it would buzz with a text message. "Popular guy," Graham observed. "Just work stuff," Jonas said, silencing the phone. "I thought you didn't have work today." "Study group. We're all helping each other prep for the exam." Graham nodded. Another lie. He was starting to collect them, filing them away for future reference. In his experience, people who lied about small things usually lied about big things too. After breakfast, they walked around the small town. Dahlia and Jonas held hands, pointing out cute shops and local attractions. Maris walked beside Graham, but there was distance between them. More than just physical distance. She seemed to be somewhere else entirely. "Penny for your thoughts," Graham said. "Just thinking about the baby, about how everything's going to change." "Change how?" "You know, the dynamics, the responsibilities, everything." Graham wondered what dynamics she was really thinking about. The dynamics of sleeping with her stepdaughter's fiancé? The dynamics of carrying a baby that might not belong to her husband? "I suppose it will be different," he said. "But we'll figure it out. We always do." Maris looked at him then. Really looked at him. And for a moment, Graham saw something in her eyes. Sadness, maybe. Or regret. He wondered if she was thinking about confessing, about telling him the truth before it was too late. But the moment passed, and she looked away. That afternoon, while the others napped, Graham drove into town to use the Wi-Fi at the local library. He wanted to research private investigators online to see if there were any closer to home than Leicester. But more than that, he wanted some time alone to think. The library was nearly empty, just a few teenagers on the computers and an elderly man reading newspapers. Graham found a quiet corner and opened his laptop. Lester had already sent an email with preliminary findings. Jonas Reese, age 24, currently enrolled at Vermont Community College. No steady employment. Credit score of 620. 2 speeding tickets in the past year. Nothing too alarming, but nothing impressive either. More interesting was the financial information. Jonas's tuition had been paid in full for the current semester, despite having no job. The payment had come from a joint account belonging to Graham and Maris Elkin. Graham stared at the screen. He'd never authorized that payment. He'd never even known about it. But there it was, $4,200 paid to Vermont Community College on behalf of Jonas Reese, funded by money Graham had earned installing air conditioning units and fixing heating systems. His phone rang. Lester. "Got some more information for you," Lester said without preamble. "Your wife's been busy." "How busy?" "Jonas isn't the only one. There's a personal trainer at her gym, some guy named Derek. She's been meeting him at a hotel in Brattleboro twice a week for the past month. Graham felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Are you sure? Credit card receipts don't lie. Same room, same hotel, every Tuesday and Thursday. Always checks in around 2 p.m., checks out around 4 p.m. Jesus. There's more. She's been paying for Derek's gym membership, his car payments, even his rent, all from your joint account. Graham closed his eyes. The pregnancy, the affair with Jonas, the second affair with Derek. How many lies was his wife living? How much? He asked. About 15 grand over the past 6 months, maybe more. I'm still digging. Keep digging. I need to know everything. Graham, what are you planning to do with this information? Graham looked around the library at the peaceful scene of people reading and studying. In a few days, they would all go back to their normal lives. But Graham's normal life was over. It had ended the moment he opened Jonas's laptop and saw those photos. I'm going to destroy them, he said quietly. Both of them. All of them. When Graham returned to the cabin, Maris was on the phone in the bedroom. She was speaking quietly, but Graham could hear fragments of the conversation through the thin walls. Can't keep doing this. What if he finds out? After the wedding. Graham stood in the hallway, listening. The conversation ended abruptly when Dahlia came out of the bathroom. Dad, you're back? How was town? Fine. Just ran some errands. Mom's been on the phone for like an hour. Wedding stress, I think. Graham doubted it was wedding stress. More likely it was adultery stress, the kind that came from juggling multiple affairs while pretending to be a devoted wife and mother. Where's Jonas? He asked. Taking a nap. He says all this fresh air is making him tired. Or maybe the stress of sleeping with his fiancé's stepmother was making him tired. Graham wondered how Jonas managed it, how he looked Dahlia in the eye every day while betraying her in the most intimate way possible. That evening, they grilled hamburgers on the deck. Graham watched Jonas flip the patties, chatting easily with Dahlia about their honeymoon plans. They were going to Niagara Falls, a cliché destination that Dahlia found romantic. Graham had offered to pay for the trip, back when he still believed Jonas was a decent person who loved his daughter. The wedding's going to be perfect, Dahlia said, leaning against Jonas's shoulder. I can't believe it's only a week and a half away. Time flies, Maris said from her chair. She'd been quiet all evening, barely touching her food. The morning sickness excuse was wearing thin. Are you feeling okay, Mom? Dahlia asked. You look pale. Just tired. The baby's taking a lot out of me. Graham watched this exchange with growing anger. The casual lies, the easy deception. How long had it been going on? How long had his wife been playing him for a fool? Maybe you should take it easy tomorrow, he suggested. Stay here while we go hiking. Actually, I was thinking of driving back to town. Run some errands, maybe get my hair done. Alone? Unless you want to come with me to the salon. Graham shook his head. He'd bet money that Maris wouldn't be going to any salon. More likely she'd be meeting Derek at their usual hotel or finding some other way to betray the family that trusted her. After dinner, Graham helped Dahlia with the dishes while Jonas and Maris sat on the deck, talking quietly. Through the window, Graham could see them leaning close together, their body language intimate, despite the fact that Dahlia was only 20 feet away. Dad, can I ask you something? Dahlia said, drying a plate. Of course. Do you like Jonas? I mean, really like him? Graham looked at his daughter, so young and hopeful. She was asking because she'd sensed something, some tension or disapproval that he'd been trying to hide. The truth was, he'd never particularly liked Jonas. Even before discovering the affair, something about the young man had bothered him. Too smooth, too charming, too quick with the right answers. What makes you ask? I don't know, you seem distant around him. Like you're not happy about the wedding. Graham chose his words carefully. I want you to be happy, Dahlia. That's all I've ever wanted. But I also want you to be careful. Marriage is complicated. People aren't always who they seem to be. Dahlia frowned. Are you and Mom having problems? The question hung in the air between them. Graham could tell her the truth, could share his suspicions and the evidence Lester had found. But that would destroy her, and she'd already been through enough trauma in her young life, losing her mother at 3, adjusting to a stepmother, now planning a wedding while dealing with an unplanned pregnancy in the family. All marriages have their challenges, he said finally. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. That night, Graham lay awake listening to Maris breathe beside him. She'd taken a sleeping pill, claiming the pregnancy was giving her insomnia. More likely, the guilt was keeping her awake, the stress of maintaining so many lies. Around 2 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but Graham recognized the area code. Vermont Community College. Can't sleep, thinking about you. The message was clearly meant for Maris, but it had been sent to Graham's number by mistake. Jonas, texting what he thought was his secret lover, accidentally revealing himself to the husband he was betraying. Graham screenshot the message and forwarded it to Lester, then deleted it from his phone. Evidence was piling up, more than enough to prove the affair. But Graham wanted more than proof. He wanted justice. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Graham was drinking coffee on the deck when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. His mother, Velma, climbed out looking flustered. "Mom, you're early. The wedding isn't until next week." I know. But I was so worried about Dahlia and excited about the baby, and I just couldn't wait. Velma hugged him tightly. "Besides, I brought someone with me." A second car pulled up behind hers. Graham watched in shock as his ex-brother-in-law, Trevor Lang, got out. Trevor was Dahlia's biological father's brother, the only connection she had left to her mother's side of the family. "Trevor, what are you doing here?" "Your mother called me," Trevor said, shaking Graham's hand. "Told me about the wedding and the baby. I wanted to meet this Jonas kid, make sure he's good enough for our girl." Graham's mind raced. He'd barely spoken to Trevor in years, not since Dahlia's high school graduation. The man had his own family, his own life. Why was he suddenly interested in Dahlia's wedding? "I hope you don't mind," Velma said. "I just thought it would be nice to have more family here for the big day." Dahlia appeared in the doorway, attracted by the voices. When she saw Trevor, her face lit up. "Uncle Trevor, I can't believe you're here." Graham watched the reunion with growing unease. Too many people, too many complications. His plan had been simple: gather evidence, confront the cheaters, protect his daughter. But now there were witnesses, family members who would ask questions and demand explanations. Maris joined them on the deck, looking surprised and slightly panicked at the unexpected arrivals. "Mrs. Elkin," Trevor said, nodding politely. "Congratulations on the pregnancy." "Thank you. Graham didn't mention you were coming." "I didn't know," Graham said. "This is a surprise to me, too." Jonas emerged from the cabin, drawn by the commotion. When he saw the crowd of people, his face went pale. "Jonas," Dahlia said excitedly. "This is my grandmother Velma and my uncle Trevor. Everyone, this is my fiancé." Trevor studied Jonas with the critical eye of a protective father figure. "So you're the young man who's stealing our girl?" "I prefer to think of it as joining the family," Jonas said, recovering his composure. "What do you do for work, son?" "I'm studying to be a paramedic, emergency medical services." "Noble profession. How do you plan to support a family on a paramedic's salary?" Jonas glanced at Maris, a quick look that Trevor didn't catch, but Graham did. "We'll manage. Dahlia's going to keep working, and I'll have a steady job once I'm certified." "And where will you live?" "We found a nice apartment in Burlington. Nothing fancy, but it's ours." Graham wondered who was paying for that apartment. According to Lester's research, Jonas had no steady income and significant debt. Someone was funding his lifestyle, and Graham was pretty sure he knew who. The day passed in a blur of family conversation and wedding planning. Velma fussed over Dahlia's dress and the flower arrangements, while Trevor interrogated Jonas about his intentions and his prospects. Graham found himself relegated to the role of observer, watching the interactions and filing away details. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Graham received another call from Lester. "I've been digging deeper into your wife's finances," Lester said. "She's got a separate credit card you don't know about. Been using it to pay for all kinds of things." "What kinds of things?" "Hotel rooms, restaurant meals, gifts, expensive gifts. There's a $3,000 charge to a jewelry store in Burlington from last month." Graham thought about the engagement ring on Dahlia's finger. He'd paid for that himself, nearly $5,000 for a modest diamond solitaire. But what if there was another ring? What if Maris had bought something for herself or for one of her lovers? "Keep tracking the credit card," Graham said. "I want to know every purchase." "Graham, I have to ask, are you planning something illegal? Because if you are, I can't be part of it." "I'm not planning anything illegal, just thorough." "Thorough can turn into obsessive pretty quickly, and obsessive can turn into dangerous." Graham ended the call and sat in the darkness of the cabin's living room. Outside, the lake lapped gently against the shore. It was peaceful here, quiet, removed from the complications of everyday life. In a few days, they would all go back to their normal routines. Except, there was nothing normal about any of this anymore. His phone buzzed with another text, this one from Dahlia's phone. "Dad, are you awake? Can you come outside? I need to talk to you." Graham found his daughter sitting on the dock, her feet dangling in the water. She'd been crying. "What's wrong?" "I think I made a mistake," she said quietly. Graham's heart rate spiked. "What kind of mistake?" "Getting engaged so young, planning a wedding so fast. I love Jonas, but sometimes I feel like I don't really know him." "What do you mean?" "He's been acting strange lately, secretive, and he's always on his phone, always texting someone. When I ask him about it, he says it's work or school, but you don't believe him." Dahlia shook her head. "I found some things in his room, bills that don't make sense, credit card statements for accounts I didn't know he had. Dad, I think he's hiding money problems from me." Graham sat down beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. She was so close to the truth, but she was focusing on the wrong deception. "Money problems are one thing," he said, "but there might be other issues too." "What do you mean?" "Dahlia, if you had doubts about Jonas, if you discovered he wasn't the person you thought he was, what would you do?" "I don't know. Call off the wedding, I guess, but Dad, all the money you've spent, all the plans we've made." "The money doesn't matter. Your happiness matters. Your future matters." Dahlia looked out over the water. "There's something else. I've been feeling sick in the mornings, like Mom with her pregnancy symptoms." Graham's blood went cold. "Sick how?" "Nauseous, tired. I took a test yesterday." She pulled something from her pocket. "A pregnancy test, positive." "Jonas doesn't know yet. I'm scared to tell him. What if he's not ready? What if this ruins everything?" Graham stared at the test in his daughter's hand. His 21-year-old daughter was pregnant by a man who was sleeping with her stepmother. The family tree was becoming a nightmare of deception and betrayal. "When did this happen?" he asked. "I think about 6 weeks ago. We were careless one night and 6 weeks ago." That would put Dahlia's conception around the same time as Maris claimed to be conceived. Both women, pregnant by the same man, neither knowing about the other. "Dad, you're scaring me. You look like you've seen a ghost." Graham forced himself to breathe normally. "I'm just surprised. This is a lot to process." "Should I tell Mom? She might understand since she's going through the same thing." "No," Graham said quickly. "Don't tell anyone yet, not until we've had a chance to figure things out. But the wedding is in a week. If I'm pregnant, that changes everything." "It might. But let's take this one step at a time." Graham walked his daughter back to the cabin, his mind reeling. The situation was even worse than he'd imagined. Not only was Jonas betraying Dahlia with her stepmother, but he'd gotten both women pregnant. The math was becoming clear. Maris's baby was almost certainly Jonas's, and now Dahlia was carrying his child, too. Inside the cabin, everyone was asleep. Graham checked on Maris, who was breathing deeply under the influence of her sleeping pills. In the guest room, Trevor was snoring loudly. His mother had taken the couch, and Jonas was sleeping in Dahlia's room, supposedly on the floor, but probably in her bed. Graham went to his laptop and typed out an email to Lester. "Situation more complicated than we thought. Dahlia is pregnant too. Need DNA testing options fast and discreet. Also need to know everything about Jonas's relationship history. Has he been with other women? Any STDs? Any other pregnancies? This is urgent." The reply came back within minutes. "Jesus Christ, Graham, this is a mess. I'll get you the information, but you need to be careful. If this kid is playing multiple women in the same family, he's either incredibly stupid or incredibly dangerous. Maybe both." Graham closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, thinking. In his HVAC work, he'd learned that complex systems required systematic solutions. You couldn't just patch one problem and hope the rest would fix itself. You had to understand the entire system, identify all the failure points, and then execute a comprehensive repair. This family was a complex system, and it was failing at multiple points. The repair was going to require precision, timing, and complete commitment. Half measures wouldn't work. Partial solutions would only create new problems. By morning, Graham had made his decision. The wedding would go on as planned, but it would not be the celebration everyone was expecting. The week passed in a blur of preparation and deception. Graham played the role of devoted husband and father, helping with last-minute wedding details while secretly collecting evidence and planning his strategy. Lester's reports painted an increasingly disturbing picture of Jonas's behavior. The young man had been involved with at least 3 other women in the past year, including a 19-year-old student from his college and a 35-year-old divorced mother of 2. In each case, he'd received financial support, gifts, or direct payments. Jonas wasn't just an adulterer. He was essentially a professional gigolo, using his charm and good looks to exploit vulnerable women. More disturbing was the revelation that Jonas had been secretly recording his private encounters. Lester had found cloud storage accounts containing dozens of videos and photos, including intimate footage of Maris that she obviously didn't know existed. "This guy's a predator," Lester told Graham over the phone. "He's been running the same con for years. Find a lonely woman, seduce her, get her to pay for his lifestyle, then move on to the next target." But why marry Dahlia if he's sleeping with Maris? Because Dahlia's young and trusting. She won't question his behavior the way an older woman might. And with you as her father, she comes with built-in financial security. He's not just marrying your daughter, he's marrying into your family's stability. Graham felt sick. His daughter wasn't just a victim of infidelity. She was the mark in an elaborate con game. Jonas had probably targeted her specifically because of her naivety and her family's middle-class stability. "What about the pregnancies?" Graham asked. "DNA tests will take a few days, but based on the timing and the other evidence, I'd say there's a 90% chance both babies are his. Question is, does he know? He has to know. The timing is too coincidental. Maybe, or maybe he's just careless. Either way, this is going to explode eventually. The question is whether you want to control the explosion or let it happen naturally." Graham chose control. On the morning of the wedding, Graham woke early and made coffee. The house was full of people: his mother, Trevor, Dahlia's bridesmaids, and various relatives who'd arrived the night before. Everyone was excited, chattering about the ceremony and the reception. Graham moved through the crowd like a ghost, smiling and nodding while his mind focused on the task ahead. At 10 a.m., he received a final report from Lester. DNA testing had confirmed what they already suspected. The baby Maris was carrying was biologically Jonas's. The report also included bank records showing a pattern of financial manipulation that stretched back over a year. Graham printed everything and put it in a manila envelope. Evidence was power, and he was about to wield more power than anyone in his family had ever imagined. The wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m. at a small church outside of town. Graham had chosen the venue himself, partly because it was beautiful and partly because it was intimate. Only 50 guests would attend, mostly family and close friends, small enough that everyone would see everything clearly. At noon, Graham drove to the church alone. He told Maris he needed to check on the flowers, but his real purpose was to set up the audio-visual equipment he'd rented: professional-grade speakers, a wireless microphone system, and a large screen that he positioned behind the altar. "Testing for the wedding video," he told the confused pastor. "Just want to make sure everything works perfectly." Back at the house, chaos reigned. Dahlia was getting her hair done while her bridesmaids fussed over makeup and dresses. Maris emerged from the master bedroom wearing a pale blue dress that accentuated her pregnancy bump. She looked radiant, glowing with what everyone assumed was maternal joy. "You look beautiful," Graham told her, and meant it. Even knowing what he knew, he could still see the woman he'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. That made what he was about to do both easier and harder. "Thank you," she said, kissing his cheek. "I'm sorry I've been so emotional lately. The hormones are making me crazy." "It's understandable. A lot of changes happening all at once." Jonas appeared in a black tuxedo, looking nervous but handsome. He'd gotten a haircut and shaved carefully. For a moment, Graham could see why both his wife and daughter had fallen for this man. There was something magnetic about him, a charisma that made people want to trust him. "Mr. Elkin," Jonas said, extending his hand, "thank you for everything. For welcoming me into the family, for paying for this wedding. I know I haven't always lived up to your expectations, but I promise I'll take care of Dahlia." Graham shook the offered hand, looking directly into Jonas's eyes. "I'm sure you'll get exactly what you deserve." At 3:30, the wedding party gathered at the church. Graham watched as his daughter emerged from the bridal car, stunning in white lace and satin. She'd lost weight over the past week, stress and morning sickness taking their toll, but she still looked like a princess, radiant with happiness and hope. "Dad," she whispered as he took her arm, "I'm so nervous." "That's normal," Graham said, walking her toward the church entrance. Everything's going to be fine. I keep thinking about what you said about people not being who they seem. What if I'm making a mistake? If you are, we'll deal with it. Together. The church was packed with familiar faces. Graham's co-workers, Maris's friends from the dental office, Jonas's study group from the paramedic program. Everyone smiling, everyone expectant. They had no idea they were about to witness the destruction of a family. Graham took his seat in the front row, next to his mother and Trevor. Maris sat beside him, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The pregnancy hormones, she'd explained. Everything made her cry these days. The music began, and Jonas took his place at the altar. He looked confident, almost smug. Graham wondered if the young man thought he'd gotten away with it, if he believed he could marry Dahlia while continuing his affair with her stepmother. Dahlia appeared in the doorway, and the congregation rose. She walked down the aisle alone, having chosen not to be given away by anyone. Independent and strong, just like her mother had been. Graham's heart broke a little watching her approach the altar where her future husband waited. The pastor began the ceremony with traditional words about love and commitment. Graham barely listened, his attention focused on the wireless remote in his pocket. At the right moment, he would press a button, and everything would change forever. "Dearly beloved," the pastor said, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Dahlia Elkin and Jonas Reese in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred bond built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. Trust, honesty, mutual respect." Graham almost laughed at the irony. "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be wed," the pastor continued, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." This was the moment. Graham's finger hovered over the remote button. Around him, the church was silent, waiting. Dahlia looked beautiful and happy. Jonas looked nervous but confident. Maris was crying softly into her tissue. Graham pressed the button. The screen behind the altar flickered to life, displaying a video file. At first, people thought it was part of the ceremony, maybe a slideshow of the couple's relationship. But then the audio kicked in, and everyone heard Maris's voice, breathy and urgent. "Are you sure Graham won't be back?" The image showed Jonas and Maris in Graham's bedroom, half-dressed and embracing. The timestamp indicated the video was recorded 3 days ago. While the wedding preparations were in full swing, gasps echoed through the church. Dahlia spun around to look at the screen, her face going white. Jonas lunged toward the projection equipment, but Graham was already moving. "Ladies and gentlemen," Graham said, standing and facing the congregation. His voice carried clearly through the wireless microphone system. "I apologize for interrupting this joyful occasion, but I felt you all deserved to know the truth about the happy couple." The video continued playing, showing more intimate moments between Jonas and Maris. The audio captured their conversation about the pregnancy, about keeping their affair secret, about how naive Dahlia was. "Dad?" Dahlia whispered, her voice breaking. "What is this?" "This is your fiancé," Graham said calmly, "having an affair with your stepmother. For the past 8 months. Chaos erupted. Maris jumped up from her seat, screaming denials. Jonas tried to reach the projection equipment, but was blocked by several large men from Graham's HVAC crew. Dahlia collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "There's more," Graham announced, pressing another button on the remote. Financial records appeared on the screen, showing payments from the Elkin joint account to Jonas's personal accounts. Tuition payments, rent payments, car payments, a total of nearly $30,000 over the past year. "This is how your future husband has been supporting himself," Graham continued. "With money stolen from our family account. Money I earned working 60-hour weeks while he was seducing my wife." Trevor stood up from his seat, his face red with anger. "You son of a witch," he said, moving toward Jonas. "She's just a kid." "It's not what it looks like," Jonas said desperately. "I can explain everything." "Really?" Graham pressed another button, and audio began playing. Jonas's voice, recorded during one of his sessions with Maris. "The kid's so stupid she believes everything I tell her, and once we're married, I'll have access to her trust fund. Plus, if something happens to Graham, Maris and I will inherit everything." The church fell silent, except for Dahlia's quiet sobs. The recording continued, revealing Jonas's plan to manipulate both women, to use the pregnancy to secure his financial future, to eventually eliminate Graham from the picture entirely. "You recorded us," Maris said, staring at Jonas in horror. "You recorded everything." "Security measure," Jonas said, his charming facade finally cracking. "Insurance policy." Graham felt a strange calm settle over him. This was the moment he'd been planning for weeks. and it was unfolding exactly as he'd envisioned. The truth was finally out, laid bare for everyone to see. "Officer Breen," Graham called out, noticing the detective who'd been sitting in the back row. She was a friend of the family, invited as a guest, but Graham had known she would respond professionally to what she witnessed. "Mr. Elkin," Detective Breen said, moving toward the altar, "this is quite a revelation." "Financial fraud, identity theft, coercion," Graham said, handing her the manila envelope. "Everything's documented. Plus, I believe you'll find evidence of other crimes if you search Mr. Reese's electronic devices." Jonas made a break for the door, but Graham's co-workers were ready for him. They tackled him in the aisle, pinning him down until Detective Breen could apply handcuffs. "Jonas Reese," she said formally, "you're under arrest for financial fraud and theft. You have the right to remain silent." Maris was still standing at the altar, staring at the screen where evidence of her crimes continued to display. The pregnancy bump under her blue dress seemed obscene now, a visible reminder of her betrayal. "Maris Elkin," Detective Breen continued, "you're also under arrest as an accessory to financial fraud." "I'm pregnant," Maris said weakly. "You can't arrest a pregnant woman." "I can arrest anyone who commits crimes," Detective Breen replied, approaching with a second set of handcuffs. Graham watched his wife's arrest with the same calm detachment he'd felt all morning. This was justice, systematic and thorough. The guilty were being punished, and the innocent were being protected. "Dad," Dahlia said, approaching him slowly, "did you know about all of this?" "I suspected. Then I investigated. Then I confirmed." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed to see it for yourself. You needed to understand exactly what kind of man you were about to marry." Dahlia looked around the church, at the chaos and destruction that had replaced her wedding ceremony. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup smeared with tears. The flowers she'd carried down the aisle lay scattered on the floor. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you start over, without him, without her, with people who actually care about you." Detective Breen led Jonas and Maris out of the church in handcuffs. The congregation began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Some looked shocked, others looked disgusted. A few looked impressed by Graham's methodical approach to revenge. "Mr. Elkin," the pastor said, approaching cautiously, "I'm not sure what to do about the reception, the catering, the music." "Cancel everything," Graham said. "Send people home. This wedding is over." Trevor put his arm around Dahlia's shoulders. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you out of here." Graham's mother approached him as the church emptied. "Graham William Elkin," she said, using his full name like she had when he was a child. "What have you done?" "I protected my daughter. I exposed the truth. I made sure justice was served. You destroyed a family." "They destroyed themselves. I just made sure everyone knew about it." Velma shook her head sadly. "This isn't over, you know. There will be consequences. Legal consequences. Emotional consequences. I'm prepared for that." Outside the church, Graham helped Dahlia into Trevor's car. She was still crying, but quietly now, the kind of tears that came with acceptance rather than shock. "Will you be okay?" Graham asked her. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore." She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "What about the baby?" "What baby?" "Mom's baby. Jonas's baby. What happens to it now?" Graham had been so focused on punishment and justice that he hadn't fully considered the aftermath. Maris would give birth in jail, assuming she didn't miscarry from the stress. The child would be innocent of its parents' crimes, but it would also be a living reminder of betrayal and deception. "That's not your problem to solve," he said finally. "But it's my half-sibling, technically. Biologically, maybe, but family is more than biology." Trevor started the car. "We're taking her to my house," he told Graham. "She needs time to process all this." Graham nodded. "Take care of her." As the car pulled away, Graham stood alone in the church parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Inside the church, janitors were already cleaning up the mess, removing the audiovisual equipment and restoring the altar to its normal configuration. His phone rang. Lester. "Saw the news," the private investigator said. "Local TV station picked up the story. Wedding interrupted by adultery revelation. You're famous." "I didn't do this for fame." "I know, but you might want to lay low for a while. This kind of public humiliation can make people desperate. Desperate people do stupid things." Graham looked around the empty parking lot. "They're both in jail. For now. But they'll make bail eventually, and when they do, they might come looking for revenge." "Let them come. Graham, I'm serious. You destroyed their lives today, completely and publicly. That's the kind of thing people end over. Graham ended the call and drove home to the empty house. Every room held memories of the family that no longer existed. The kitchen where Maris had announced her pregnancy. The living room where Dahlia had shown him her engagement ring. The bedroom where his wife had betrayed him with his daughter's fiancé. He poured himself a whiskey and sat on the deck overlooking the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the last light of the sunset. Tomorrow, the media would probably show up, wanting interviews and explanations. The legal proceedings would begin, custody hearings and divorce proceedings and criminal trials. But tonight, for the first time in months, Graham felt peace. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You think you won, but this isn't over. I know where you live." Graham deleted the message without responding. They could threaten him all they wanted. The truth was out now, documented and public. Whatever happened next, at least his daughter would never have to wonder if she'd made the right choice. 2 days later, Detective Breen called with an update. "Jonas made bail," she said. "His sister posted bond, but Maris is still in custody. Judge denied bail because of flight risk. What about the charges? Financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Jonas is looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. Maris might get less because of the pregnancy, but she's still facing serious time. And Dahlia? She's cooperating fully. Gave us access to Jonas's electronics, his financial records, everything. We found evidence of at least 6 other victims, women he's been scamming over the past 3 years." Graham felt a grim satisfaction. The investigation he'd started to protect his daughter was now protecting other women as well. Justice was expanding beyond his personal situation. "There's something else," Detective Breen continued. "Jonas violated his bail conditions. He tried to contact your daughter yesterday, left threatening messages on her voicemail. We're issuing a warrant for his arrest." "What kind of threats?" "The usual. Blamed her for his problems. Said she ruined his life. Classic manipulation tactics." Graham remembered Lester's warning about desperate people doing stupid things. Jonas was definitely desperate now, his carefully constructed cons exposed, his future destroyed. That made him dangerous. "I'll let Dahlia know," Graham said. "Already did. She's staying with her uncle for now, and we've got extra patrols in the area. But you should be careful too. You're the one who exposed him." That evening, Graham was working in his garage when he heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, he saw Jonas getting out of a battered sedan, moving with purpose toward the front door. Graham reached for his phone to call police, but Jonas was already pounding on the door. "Open up, you bastard," Jonas shouted. "You destroyed my life. You destroyed everything." Graham moved through the house carefully, staying away from windows. He'd changed the locks after Maris's arrest, but Jonas was young and desperate. There was no telling what he might do. "I know you're in there," Jonas continued. "Come out and face me like a man." The pounding stopped, and Graham heard footsteps moving around the house. Jonas was checking other entrances, looking for a way in. Graham called emergency and reported the violation, then went to his bedroom closet and retrieved the tool he'd inherited from his father. The sound of breaking glass came from the kitchen. Jonas had found a way in. "Graham!" Jonas's voice echoed through the house. "Where are you, you piece of crap?" Graham positioned himself at the top of the stairs, tool in hand, but not raised. He had no intention of harming an unarmed man, but he wanted to be ready if things got out of control. Jonas appeared at the bottom of the stairs, holding a kitchen knife he'd grabbed from the counter. His face was flushed with rage and desperation. "There you are," Jonas said. "Time to pay for what you did to me." "What I did to you?" Graham kept his voice calm. "I exposed the truth. Everything else is consequences of your own actions. I loved her. I loved them both. And you destroyed it because you're a jealous, pathetic old man. You were using them. Using their money, using their trust, using their bodies. That's not love." Jonas started up the stairs, knife raised. "You don't know anything about love. You're just a cold, bitter mechanic who couldn't keep his wife satisfied." Graham raised the tool, not aiming it directly at Jonas, but making sure it was clearly visible. "That's far enough. You won't do anything. You're too much of a coward. Try me." Jonas hesitated on the stairs, weighing his options. The sound of sirens grew louder outside. "This isn't over," Jonas said, backing down the stairs. "Even if they lock me up, this isn't over. Someday I'll get out and I'll find you." "No," Graham said quietly. "It is over. Today. Right now." Police cars surrounded the house, their lights flashing red and blue through the windows. Jonas dropped the knife and raised his hands, finally understanding that his options had run out. Detective Breen led Jonas away in handcuffs for the second time in 3 days. This time, there would be no bail, no second chances. Attempted breaking and entering, attack with a deadly tool, violation of bail conditions. Jonas's criminal career was finished. "You okay?" Detective Breen asked Graham. "I'm fine. Is this really over now?" For Jonas, yeah. He's looking at serious prison time, especially with the other victims coming forward. The DA is talking about federal charges too, since he scammed women in multiple states. And Maris? Still in custody. Her lawyer is trying to work out a plea deal, but she's not cooperating. Keeps insisting she's the victim in all this. Graham wasn't surprised. Maris had always been good at rewriting history to make herself look innocent, but the evidence was overwhelming now, documented and public. There was no narrative she could construct that would explain away the videos and financial records. 6 months later, Graham sat in a courtroom watching Jonas receive a 15-year sentence for multiple counts of fraud, theft, and attack. Maris had already been sentenced to 8 years, though she would likely serve less due to the pregnancy and her cooperation in testifying against Jonas. Dahlia sat beside him, 8 months pregnant and showing. She'd decided to keep the baby despite everything, arguing that the child wasn't responsible for its father's crimes. Graham had supported her decision, though privately he worried about the challenges she would face as a single mother. "Do you feel better now?" she asked as they left the courthouse. "Better how?" "Like justice was served, like you got revenge." Graham considered the question. Jonas was in prison, Maris was in prison, the truth was public, and the other victims had been compensated from their recovered funds. By any objective measure, justice had been served. But Graham didn't feel triumphant. He felt empty, like a man who'd spent so much energy on destruction that he'd forgotten how to build anything positive. "I feel like I did what needed to be done," he said finally. "But was it worth it? Destroying the family, putting everyone through this trauma?" Ask me that question in 10 years, when you've raised your child without a criminal father, when you've built a life based on honesty instead of lies. And tell me if it was worth it. Dahlia didn't respond. She was still young, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. Graham understood that she might never forgive him for the way he'd exposed the truth, for choosing public humiliation over private confrontation. But forgiveness wasn't the point. Protection was the point. Justice was the point, making sure that people who hurt innocent victims faced consequences for their actions. 3 years later, Graham received a letter from Maris. She'd been released early for good behavior and wanted to see their child. The baby she'd claimed was his, who had turned out to be Jonas's, who was now being raised by Dahlia with help from Trevor's family. Graham threw the letter away without responding. 5 years later, Jonas was released on parole. He moved to another state, changed his name, and tried to rebuild his life. But the internet never forgot. His crimes were documented online, searchable by anyone who bothered to look. He would never again be able to run the same cons, never again be able to exploit vulnerable women with promises of love and commitment. 7 years later, Dahlia graduated from nursing school with honors. She'd used the trauma of her experience to fuel a desire to help others, to heal instead of hurt. Her son was 6 years old, bright and curious, with no memory of his biological father. "I think I understand now," she told Graham at her graduation party. "What you did, why you did it. Do you forgive me?" "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I'm grateful. If you hadn't stopped me from marrying Jonas, if you hadn't exposed what he was, I might have wasted my whole life believing in a lie." Graham nodded. It was enough, more than enough. 10 years later, Graham died quietly in his sleep. He'd lived alone since the destruction of his marriage, content with his work and his books and his occasional visits with Dahlia and his grandson. He'd never remarried, never tried to rebuild what had been broken. At his funeral, Dahlia spoke about the father who had loved her enough to destroy his own life to save hers. She talked about the difference between comfort and protection, between enabling lies and exposing truth. He wasn't a perfect man, she said to the gathered mourners. But he was a man who understood that sometimes love requires difficult choices. Sometimes love requires sacrifice. Sometimes love requires becoming the villain in someone else's story so they can become the hero of their own. In the end, that was Graham's legacy, not the HVAC systems he'd repaired, or the money he'd earned, or the comfortable life he'd built. His legacy was the daughter he'd saved, and the grandson who would grow up free from the lies that had nearly destroyed their family. Sometimes the real punishment isn't death or jail. Sometimes it's waking up every day knowing you were outplayed by someone who loved their family more than they loved themselves.